Art, Patrick, Tashi. Before we watch a single rally of tennis, before we even see the MGM production logo, we get close-ups of our three main characters, Art, Patrick, and Tashi. A different director may instead open with a title card, then cut to here. Audiences have come to watch people play tennis, right? Well, Luca Guadagnino doesn't seem to think so at all, because according to the director himself, Challenges is not a movie about tennis. It's about people. In most Hollywood films, the events we watch tend to play out in chronological order. We perceive time as moving in one direction, so of course it's intuitive to assume that each scene occurs in the order they are shown. However, the great thing about movies is that we can break the rules entirely through the use of non-linear storytelling. Christopher Nolan is of course famous for this, playing with the concept of time in films like Tenet, Interstellar, and Memento. His most recent work, Oppenheimer, uses non-linear storytelling in an interesting way. The real events depicted in the film are shown to us in a different order to how they actually occurred. We jump back and forth between Oppenheimer's security clearance meeting in 1954, Strauss's Senate confirmation hearing in 1959, and the rest of Oppenheimer's life and work at Los Alamos. This isn't a new technique. Directors like Quentin Tarantino have also employed it in films like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. Challenges also uses the same non-linear format, with the finals match at New Rochelle being intercut between the main characters' tennis careers. It is extremely hard to tell a story this way, requiring precise editing to avoid confusing the audience. Luckily, this structure was written into the screenplay itself, making editor Marco Costa's job much easier.
Of course, when we get the first cut of the movie, we edit according to the script, so keeping every lines, every scene, and we realized that the structure was perfect.
It definitely helps that the costuming and makeup visually distinguish each character from their time in college to professional athletes. In fact, most of Marco's effort was spent on the text cards, clearly indicating when each scene takes place in relation to the finals match.
We worked more on the cards you see on the screen because we want to be sure that the audience doesn't get lost.
In a linear narrative, tension is usually created by making the audience wonder what happens next. Will the hero save the day? Who's the real murderer? However, Challenge's non-linear structure means we see the finals match before anything else. Tension instead doesn't come from what will happen, because we already know what the story is building towards. Instead, the audience asks a different question. How did we get here? Showing the events out of order creates a puzzle for viewers to solve. As one example, it is established early on that Art and Tashi are married and have a kid together. Later, however, we see that Tashi actually started dating Patrick during college. We therefore cannot help but wonder, what happened for Tashi to switch partners? The beauty of non-linear storytelling is that it can slowly reveal a character's true motivations by waiting until later in the narrative to show their past actions, recontextualizing what we've already watched. This framework extends beyond the order of scenes and into the editing itself. Something that struck out to me while rewatching the film was a lack of continuity within the finals match itself. Take a look at this quick clip from one of the rallies. The editing starts off normally, then suddenly has two quick cuts of Art hitting the ball, with no reverse shot in between of Patrick returning his first one. It feels jarring when you watch it, but that's actually Marco's intention. Mismatching parts of the rally puts us in the shoes of the players, feeling frantic and tired from having to play tennis against each other.
You can feel that there is an evolution of the language. We try to create this evolution even in the editing. At the beginning, it's like a tennis match, a regular, normal tennis match. But then, at the second serve, there is a couple of quick cuts. That means, okay, we are skipping some time. We are preparing something new.
This cut Marco refers to occurs at the start of the film, and I love it. It's efficient, since we don't need to watch another 15 seconds of Art serving the ball again, but it also hints to the time-hopping nature of the film that's yet to come. At the end of the day, the emotional impact is more important than whether continuity is followed. The fact that Marco was able to stitch together this non-linear narrative with unconventional editing choices and still keep a consistent rhythm is super impressive. Prior to this, his only editing work on a movie was in Bones and All, also directed by Luca Guadagnino. With this partnership continuing for Queer, I am looking forward to watching it evolve. On the first day of editing, Luca came to the editing room and said, "I want to do a modernist style of editing." I didn't know what he meant until he showed me a picture of a building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright and told me that his film had to be like this.
He talked me about the modernist building. He showed me this fantastic picture, and he told me I want a language, an editing style like these buildings.
The idea of symmetry between our three main characters is constantly conveyed through the editing of challenges. Patrick and Art, Fire and Ice, and Tashi being the central force driving them both. Even in their very first interaction at the Adidas party, this dynamic is explored by which cuts are used. The scene almost never switches between Art and Patrick, always going through Tashi. As the audience, we feel as if the dialogue itself is a tennis match. Every transition from Art to Patrick, or vice versa, always passes through Tashi. This visually establishes her as the focal point of the interactions, increasing the tension between the two men. Then, after establishing this tension, only at specific moments, we chose to transition between Art and Patrick without going through Tashi, to affirm the idea of a triangle where all points touch and are connected to each other. It's bi-directional. While many romance films using this trope have two people fighting over one lover, Challenges places heavy emphasis on the homoerotic tension between Art and Patrick. Sometimes it's obvious, but it's also conveyed in subtle ways through the blocking and editing choices. One example is this scene, where we have quick cuts of the two men that line up perfectly with each other, and others that are mirror images. It seems like such a simple idea, but the use of symmetry plays a multifaceted role. A tennis court is perfectly symmetric, with the net almost acting like a mirror. The love triangle that underpins the film also has a beautiful symmetry to it, with each point connected. These cuts of Patrick and Art reinforce the dynamic of their complicated friendship. Fire and ice, two halves of a whole, with Tashi serving as the glue binding them together. Just quickly before we continue, please leave a like if you're enjoying this video so far. The response to my last one has been absolutely overwhelming. Thank you all for the kind comments. I want to keep hearing from you, so this time please let me know, what was your favourite film of 2024? Challenges is mine personally, hence, well, why I made this video. I'm looking forward to reading all of your comments. While this video isn't necessarily about the music of Challenges, it is impossible for me to avoid mentioning Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's brilliant score. As a side note, apologies for not playing any of it, YouTube has a very strict copyright policy. At first it may seem odd to have techno music, reminiscent of raves in the 90s. However, this makes a lot more sense when we consider Luca Guadagnino's vision for the film.
Because I remember Luca, when we were in the editing room, Luca told me, I want people dance with this movie.
When Challenges was initially released, I remember seeing a lot of complaints online that the music overpowers the dialogue in certain scenes. I will admit, it's not everyone's cup of tea, and I can see why many were frustrated. However, I personally love it. Given that the structure and editing are meant to be reminiscent of a tennis match, the high energy score kicking in during intense arguments does more to reinforce that notion. Hence, this might come across as a shock, but Marco Costa edited the entire first cut of the movie without any music.
We actually edited the entire movie without score, so we kept the music in mind, because we didn't want to be influenced in any way by by using a temp score, a temp music. I want to be focused in the picture.
Instead of scenes being edited to match the music, the opposite is true. The music is edited to match each scene. Luckily, this is much easier to do given the repetitive techno beats. It's how you are able to still get natural pacing of the argument in Tashi's dorm, which was shot in one continuous take. The synths and drums kick in at crucial moments to emphasize certain parts of their argument, like when Patrick compares Art to a lapdog, or Tashi calls him out for not being part of her fan club. Their back and forth jabs feel like a tennis rally, almost like we can dance to their emotional turmoil. This high-octane pacing continues throughout most of the film, even in intimate discussions. Marco has gone on record to say that the bedroom scene of Art announcing his retirement to Tashi is one of his favourites. It's a scene I'm particularly fond of, where I received, if I'm not mistaken, around 25 different shots, and you can feel a progression of the language in this scene. One of the biggest challenges for us was bringing the language of tennis into the dialogue. In this scene, you can feel the ball going back and forth across the court, constantly being hit from one side to the other. You feel how the emotional tension transforms into competition. Despite the lack of music, and the movie slowing down for this intimate moment, the way in which it's edited still harks back to tennis. Most emotional scenes are not cut this way, as constantly switching camera angles can be distracting for the audience. However, given that this occurs not long before the climax, and the style of editing has been consistent throughout the film, it does not take us out of the moment. Breaking the rules is one thing, but more importantly, an editor needs to know when it is appropriate to do so. Speaking of the climax, I'm not joking when I say the last 10 minutes of this film is some of the best cinema of 2024. Once we find out Tashi slept with Patrick the night before the game, the board has been set. Art lets the game go to a tiebreak, and the pace of the film suddenly shifts. For 2 whole hours, we have been sprinting through the lives of our protagonists. There's been constant drama and tension, with each rope on the love triangle being pulled back and forth. Now they have been stretched to their absolute limits. So when we are on the edge of our seat, when we most want to find out who wins the match, Marco slams his foot on the brakes. We start getting excruciatingly long slow-mo shots, relishing each moment as the camera slowly zooms in on Art and Patrick. We wanted the audience to fully experience this moment. In the end, it's a bit like a showdown. It's reminiscent of the Mexican standoff in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. There, the suspension of time is crucial. We can feel our heart pumping. The suspense slowly builds up. As we get closer and closer to Art serving the ball, the camera hones in on their faces. The anger and hatred they have for one another slowly morphs into a smile. Without a single line of dialogue, we know what both are thinking. Let's finally play some real tennis. As the serve happens, we get a tennis rally unlike anything we've ever seen before. The score kicks in, and we are suddenly watching the match from the point of view of a tennis ball. The intensity and speed ramps up dramatically, higher than any other point of the film. Like Tashi, we are fully invested and truly watching something special. Art and Patrick are no longer playing tennis. They are in a relationship, perfectly in sync with one another, dancing on opposite sides of the court. As they get closer and closer to the net, Patrick hits the ball up high and Art jumps for it. As the music crescendos to its climax, the two embrace each other, with different cuts and angles highlighting the moment like an action replay. It doesn't matter who won. Tashi finally got to watch the two play some good f***ing tennis. The final sequence was cooked to absolute perfection and solidifies Challenges as my favourite movie of 2024. Please make sure to give me a like if you've made it this far, and subscribe for more videos like this one.